Shayne, welcome to the show. We've had a bit of a fun time getting this started, but we're finally here, after a couple of weeks. I'm very excited to talk to you. I'm a screenwriter myself, and I've been inspired by a lot of your work over the years. I was telling you before, I saw you at a Q&A with Stephen Irwin, and basically since then I've been super keen just to talk to you about some of the stuff you've done, get you on the show, mostly because it's nice to see living proof that after all of the long nights and the empty mugs and scrunched up pieces of paper that, it's actually possible to get something on the big screen.
Yeah, absolutely.
And have like a really, a diverse and interesting career, as we'll go through today in the show. For those that don't know, you've written a lot of horror movies, such as things that you'll be seeing right here. We'll put like little images behind you of the goriest moments from your films.
Excellent.
With your screenwriting partner, Shayne, or SP Kraus. Am I saying that correctly?
Yes, you're pronouncing Shayne absolutely correctly.
Awesome. So those are films like ACOYLTES, Bait. Do you include the 3D when you mention it?
I don't normally. I forget it was in 3D. I can't even remember whether
Did you see it?
I did.
Wow.
But I don't remember whether I saw it in 3D or not. I've got the Blu-ray and it's definitely not 3D because I generally hate 3D. It's used terribly most of the time.
Yeah, I agree.
It's kind of fizzled now, really. I mean, not many. Is anyone putting out movies in 3D as much?
They are, but it's interesting. I have one of these relics. I have a 3D TV.
Okay.
And so I'm one of the few people that goes through the bargain bins at JB Hi-Fi, and I'll be like, oh, Titanic in 3D. Surely it's 3 times as good as the original. Uh-huh. And I can confirm Titanic in 3D, the only movie worth buying.
Right.
In 3D.
Well, there's one movie that I do like in 3D, and that's My Bloody Valentine 3D, because it goes back to the way they used 3D in the 1950s, which was the old coming at you kind of thing of, something would literally come off the screen. So at one point, the guy throws his trademark killing pickaxe, and I saw it on Halloween, the year of its release. It would have been in the early 2000s, I think, and seeing a couple of hundred people duck and scream at the same time, that's the way you use 3D.
Yeah.
There was full frontal nudity, which is even more
in 3D.
In 3D, and I thought, I'm just so glad I didn't see Watchmen in 3D, because Dr. Manhattan's giant blue junk coming
his
out.
giant atomic genitals.
Exactly. Yeah, it's confronting for most people. I did see it in IMAX though, so that was tough enough.
Yeah, well, pro tips out there if you're ever doing reruns. So you've written, horror films. That sort of seems to be what you're mostly known for. Yes. So I suppose the most important question is, what's your ghost story? What's your go-to ghost story? Surely you've got one.
Look, there is, and I've turned it into a script myself. I've probably got 2. My 2 ghost stories really come from my grandmother, and one that I made up on the spot. When I was a kid, I actually died on the operating table, so I'm one of these people who's had a near-death experience. I've gone through the tunnel of light and all that kind of stuff. I came back, and I was at a family barbecue, but I was like entertaining kids with this ghost story, and I told them about how I died on the operating table, and I just got them all to lean in, and I said, listen, and I want to tell you something. I'm not even Shayne Armstrong. My name's Frank something. I can't remember the guy's last name. And I said, and I'm 40-something years old, which is younger than what I am now. But, at the time, when I was 7 or 8 years old, these kids just went into hysterics.
Yeah.
And I'd always thought about that. And we've kind of like turned that kind of premise into a script that's in development at the moment. But the other one is my grandmother, when she was a teenager in World War II, and her boyfriend went away to war. And he was in the Navy, and she woke up one night and there was a kind of a spectral figure standing beside her, and it pointed at her clock beside her bed, and then it sat on the end of the bed, and she said it felt like there was just water. It was like damp and very wet. And then a couple of days later she got a telegram telling her that her boyfriend's boat had been sunk, and everyone on board had drowned, and it was approximately at the time at which the spectre had pointed to her alarm clock. So there you go.
Well, I'm glad you came back to the land of the living purely so you can be on this podcast. I think that's the reason that you've been sent back.
I think I disappointed a lot of my teachers though by coming back.
Right.
I was an awful child.
Surely now though.
I think my parents were even on the fence, but anyway, I'm sure they were relieved.
surely now though it's like, you can sort of point to, you're a success in the film industry and be like, there you go. People have like that amnesia of like, we'll forgive him because he was a weird kid.
That's right. I also think, well, things could have been worse. I could be dead and have been.
Right.
Yeah.
That's true. So your ghost story is you are a ghost, or at least almost
ghost.
were. Yeah. Speaking of scary things, welcome to episode 27 of the SLOP Podcast, the interview series that fills your ears with wild discussions. As we just had fascinating stories, which it's all downhill from here. Doesn't really get much interesting than that.
That's a normal weekend for me.
And unique insights from Australia's most interesting creators like Shayne Armstrong today. Roll the intro. So, Shayne, you're an award-winning screenwriter.
Mm-hmm.
We mentioned some of the movies before, but then there's also a lot of movies that I am a big fan of, which people don't tend to mention, like Johnny Bravo Goes to Hollywood.
Yes.
Or K9, which was a big part of my childhood as a Doctor Who fan, or semi-Doctor Who. There's...
It's an unofficial spin-off, and it's pleasant now that people like yourselves who were kids and saw it have grown up with fondness to it, because I've just been dealing with the hate of middle-aged
the Whovians,
the Whovians who hated it. So it's nice to have actual, the intended target audience, which was kids who have grown up and they quite like it, and my kids like it as well. So
yeah, I went back just before this and I watched a section of the pilot, which is on YouTube, and it just brought back so many memories. It's strange how that happens.
It's a good show. It was really ambitious for an Australian kids sci-fi show, and because generally the sci-fi element is pretty superficial in most kids TV, whereas with K9 it was forefront. We tried to be as inventive and imaginative as Doctor Who.
A dog that can regenerate.
That's right. Well, that was obviously stolen from Doctor Who. So there were lots of little nods to Doctor Who that we would try to get away from letters from BBC lawyers.
The thing that confused me when did it come out? Like 2007 or something? But I remember being really confused as a kid, being like, everyone's British, but Mum's telling me they filmed it in Australia. Yeah. And so I was very confused.
Brisbane, West End, actually.
Wow. Yeah. There you go. So for all the kids out there who grew up with K9.
Yeah, so the Brisbane, the wheel, the South Bank wheel.
Yes.
The Ferris wheel, that stood in for the London Eye. I think it's about a quarter of the size or something.
True. Brisbane is just a discount Aldi version of London.
That's true. But the real spin, though, is the guy who played Alistair Griffin, who had the best British accent out of everyone. He was Canadian.
Right. That's how it goes. So you've done a whole bunch of like live action animated series as well as the movies. You teach screenwriting, as you said, everywhere along the East Coast. You're currently also teaching at QT. You said you're doing marketing.
Copywriting, and creative strategy. Which is what I started out doing before I became a screenwriter.
Full circle coming back.
Yeah, well, I mean, I started teaching. I kind of started teaching it at the same time I went on the path. To give you the quick rundown, I studied Bachelor of Arts, English Lit, which is and drama, which was probably the most valuable degree for me to study as a writer. A lot of people make jokes about arts degrees and so forth. If you actually want to be kind of a critical thinker, if you want to sharpen your literary skills, an arts degree is absolutely fantastic for it. It opened up my mind to a whole new world of literature and styles of writing and thinking about writing.
Yeah.
But when I went to get a job, I thought, look, I either become a high school teacher or what else can I do? And I thought, what can I do to prostitute all the good skills I've just learned over the last few years? So I went and studied advertising. And I worked in advertising for a number of years. And I had a mid-20s crisis where I just thought, I need to get back to doing the thing I really wanted to do as a kid and in high school, which was to be a writer. And so I quit full-time work. I went freelance as a copywriter and then slowly, took on some teaching work. And as I built up my screenwriting career, I still kept the part-time teaching for a few reasons. One, that it pays pretty well, and the writing gig is it's up and down. It's cyclical. It's not like a constant thing. You know, I am kind of constantly busy, but the big checks you get in the industry is when something actually gets made. You know, you get paid dribs and drabs for development, writing a Bible or a script, but it's not until, you know, the cameras are rolling and it gets real that you get a larger check. So you need to have something backing you up all the way. So, you know, you'll probably get to some questions about that, but that's always my tip to people. I'm not saying don't not give up your day job, because that's exactly what I did, but make sure you've got some kind of backup, you know. So but I see it as a good compliment for me, because, you know, copywriting is still creative writing. Teaching writing is an aspect that I still see it's a facet of being a writer, and plenty of writers that I admire do teach as well. So, you know, I didn't feel I was, you know, slumming it to do it, and I quite enjoy it.
And I feel like if you were just constantly writing scripts, it would just get very monotonous after a while. Well, like you need something else to pull your attention.
You do, yeah, and you get lonely. It's the loneliest profession, and I quite like being by myself and writing, but at a certain point you kind of like to get out of the house and just see fresh faces and talk to people. And at the end of the day, you know, I'm reading ideas, I'm critiquing work, which is what I do professionally as a script editor anyway. And I think also when you look at someone else's work, especially when you are teaching someone to become a writer, that you kind of refocus on your own work and reapply those basic principles that sometimes you just forget.
Totally.
So, yeah.
That makes sense. I like what you said about doing the arts degree and like English lit and stuff, because I feel like a lot of the things you need to have as a writer is that sort of understanding of what's come before and what you can sort of work with structurally, but also like life experience.
Yeah.
And so I was listening, there's an interview on your website, your WordPress, from I think it's like the premiere of ACOYLTES or something. It's 2008. And you had this very interesting quote where you talk about you guys, the Shaynes, living in Dalby and then moving to Brisbane. And you talked about having this urge to get out of there, right? And I could really relate to that, because I lived in like Gundawindi and Toowoomba and grew up out there, and then came back to Brisbane and things like that. And that's how I got into writing, was there's nothing else to do, you know? And you got some very interesting characters and things. So I guess the important question to ask is, how does it feel to be the second most successful filmmaker from Dalby?
You mean apart from Margot Robbie?
Yes, so apart from Margot Robbie.
I know, there's a large gap there. It feels pretty good. You know, Margot's grandfather was my dentist, so I figured she owes me a movie.
True.
Her grandfather caused me. So, yeah, that's right. Look, it's, you know, it's just something you have to deal with. I've got a bit of catch up to do. But yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. There's another writer who actually passed away a few years ago, who's a few years above me at school. He passed away quite early from cancer. His name was Andrew McGann, and he was quite a famous novelist and award-winning novelist, and similar kind of, you know, generation to me. There's not too many people apart from Margot, you know, and she made inroads through acting, of course. But I think the people that were writers and poets, there was a cluster of us that came out in the sort of 80s, and I think that was because things changed after that. Once the internet came to Dalby, and there was network TV, we didn't have that phenomenon as much of not having what everyone else in the cities had. So we had very limited entertainment there. And arguably that's still the case. You know, you're a lot younger than me and you still felt that pull of getting out of those small places. But as you know, it's almost like this divide. It's the people who stay and they love it, you know, and then there are people who leave and they pull away from it. And it's nice to go back, but it's just not for me. You know, I couldn't work there anyway. You disconnected from the industry.
That's right. So then, speaking of the industry, we'll go through the rigmarole. You know, the classic breaking into the industry story. We'll get the usual business out of the way, and then I got some fun things to do later.
Okay.
So I guess if you could give us the quick summary, the Shayne, and then the fame, and we'll see where we go.
All right. Well, I mean, the way I got into the industry, as I said, when I was a kid, I always wanted to be a writer, and I used to write short stories even when I didn't have to, and I would write really bad comic books, that were just my version of Batman, and sometimes I create my own characters, but I just rip off Archie comics and just like completely plagiarize them, but slightly change a few designs.
Yeah.
So I always wanted to be a writer in some form. And then I just didn't know how to become one. There wasn't a lot of film courses around that were available to me. If there were the wealth of film courses that are around today, I probably would have applied for that rather than go for maybe an arts degree or psychology, which I started out studying anyway. But so I kind of like dovetailed back to it. I had my mid-20s crisis. So I decided I want to do what I needed to do. And while I was freelance copywriting, writing ads, doing a little bit of teaching casually as well, my writing partner he started out in advertising as well. He decided to break away and he wanted to do something, and so he was very proactive, and he got up a kids puppet show called Odd Socks, just a P-class puppet show. And as often happens, the network saddled him with their go-to writers. They have their little friends club of people they like to work with, and he was the new guy. And he said, look, one of the writers has written this script. I don't think he did a good job. I think you could do a better job. And so I did, He says he paid me. I don't remember that. And I've got a pretty good memory for that kind of thing. But I certainly got a credit.
He paid you with a credit, yeah.
Yeah. And
experience.
That was, so I had my first screenwriting credit, which I don't even think it's even on my IMDb after all that. But after that experience, which I really enjoyed, and a pilot was made. I've probably got the VHS, as was the template back then, somewhere. But then we decided to write more long form stuff. So we wrote a horror screenplay that has never been out of option, and in fact it's back in development at the moment. Wow. A creature feature. We wrote a stupidly long treatment. It was about 400 pages of dense prose, and of course no one ever read it, so we just turned it into a novel, and that's on it's called Unbidden, with our pen name TJ Park.
I was gonna ask you about this. I got a couple of questions. We'll get to it later. But
anyway, so we wrote that. But then so we were writing Bibles and pilot episodes and doing a bit of commission work for quite a few years, and we had different scripts in development. And then we wrote ACOYLTES, and that was just good timing. Wolf Creek had come out, and people were looking for the next Wolf Creek, and ACOYLTES wasn't really that. It was kind of more of a Euro-style crime thriller in our draft anyway. But people thought it's cheap. It can be thrilling. It can be a bit scary. It kind of crosses that line between thriller and horror. And so it was fast tracked. I think it was 2 years between us writing it and it getting on screen. And I think the average for most Australian films in development is between 7 and 10 years. So, there are many go longer. As I said, our first script that we wrote has been in development many times. And I think it's 20 years since we first wrote it. It might get up this time. Who knows? But ACOYLTES had its debut. It got us an agent, and then work begets work. So we kind of were on the map then, and then that all started out. As far as the kids writing go, that's probably even a more strange route, because Shayne and I started out doing ads for Disney.
Oh, okay.
And then when we were working for Disney, he was directing the ads and we were co-writing them, and we did some award-winning promos for them. And when they decided, that they wanted to make the K9 show, they came to us. They were Doctor Who fans, and we'd got some run on the boards as screenwriters.
Yeah.
And so, and then of course other people that worked at Disney, when we were doing the ads for them, had gone on to Cartoon Network, and so we just started getting hit with offers to write for kids shows, and so that's how that developed. So it's a strange little path, but we embrace it and roll with it.
Yeah, initially I was kind of confused as to how those two things happened, but then I thought, well, you're writing in genre, and it sort of carries over, sort of. In
exactly.
That sense.
I mean, we don't do pure sci-fi in Australia in adult space. I mean, there are shows that dally with it, like the Kettering Incident or Bloom or Glitch, but they're really dramas with a dash of sci-fi, whereas. Or fantasy, but K9 is, you have to say, it's predominantly sci-fi.
Yep.
So
definitely.
you get a chance to do that. Yeah.
Awesome. We have our segment of today, which I've titled The Triviad, which is where today we're going to go through your IMDb, there is a thing on IMDb called IMDb Trivia. You're probably aware of this.
No.
Have you looked at any of the trivia for your films?
Oh, yeah. That's right. There is IMDb Trivia, and they're often quite not very non-trivia as well. They're just broad, basic statements. So
That's exactly right. So on some of your other work, there is a lot of interesting trivia, but on ACOYLTES, there is one piece of trivia, and it says, this film is considered an Ozploitation picture, an Australian exploitation movie. And that's it.
Wow.
And most of the other pages have, upwards of 12 pieces of trivia. And so I thought today, to get some interesting insights into that project,
yes,
we could add something to the trivia page, and you could give us an interesting piece of trivia about the movie ACOYLTES.
Okay. Well, I would have to say the first one that I think would strike a lot of people is how semi-autobiographical the film is.
Right.
So,
okay.
a lot of it is a mix of things that happened to Shayne and myself growing up. Not the murder, as far as I know.
Right.
Shayne has something to tell me, but certainly it's set in a what would you call it? An analog of Dolby. The kinds of people we grew up in. So some people kind of like understand it when they if you're from a small town, it's hyper real. What life wasn't that dangerous for us, but occasionally we got chased by bogans. But so for example, we talk about this in that Biff interview, but the car chase scene was based on a true event where Shayne and I were chased by a muscle car through the streets of Dolby one night, and the guy tried to run us down, and he ran into a neighbor's house and banged on their doors, and they just drove through their yard and shone their lights high beam on us until they got bored and drove away.
It's terrifying.
That's right.
The one thing that I did find pretty funny when I listened through that was you talk about how going to the dump was a thing to do. Definitely been there, small town dump. You're like, cool.
I think they're fascinating to kids. It's like graveyard. It's a graveyard for household items.
It's an outdoor garage sale that's been
apart
going.
From the stench, it was kind of like fun to find discarded items, or my hope was always I was going to find this stash of. I know you think I'm going to say porno, but it's comics.
Yeah, right.
Very innocent child, but I was probably more likely to find a stash of porno, knowing the residents out there. But no, there was no stashes of comics, unfortunately. But occasionally you'd find some sort of thing you could pretend was a weapon.
True. Yeah. So it's semi-autobiographical. And so I guess, would you say that most of the stuff that you write, even to this day, is still taking elements from life? Or do you think that, like, at a certain point, you start inventing more than you start, biographying? Yeah,
it's definitely not that. Like, there's not a lot of us in Bait 3D, even the draft that we wrote.
Right.
Sharks in a supermarket. Although we were able to correct some errors that were in the early draft, such as Tweed Heads being a small Gold Coast Queensland town, which is none of those things.
So the first draft wasn't written by an Australian?
It was, yeah, but I don't think
they'd been to Tweed Heads.
Okay. Or not in a very long time.
Okay.
So we corrected a little bit of that. But there was a hero speech in Bait 3D that was based on an incident that happened to me when I was a kid. Like our next door neighbors had a gigantic German Shepherd, and everyone was scared of this dog. And Shayne also knew them. He was actually family friends with them, and so we both talked about this gigantic German Shepherd that we were very scared of. And so we built this story where one of the main villains, or our anti-hero, really, he's a villain, but he turns into a hero by the end. He tells a story of when he was a kid and he was afraid of this giant dog, and all these rumors had sprung out that it was, part wolf, that it was all wolf, that it might have been a werewolf, all these crazy urban myths that sprung up, which happens in small towns. Lots of weird little urban myths spring up around everyone. And how, one day his G.I. Joe got tossed over the fence, and he thought, well, do I just let it die and get chewed up by this beast, or do I, man up and leap over the wall and face it? And he does, and he sees that it's just a dog. It's a big, vicious dog, but it's just a dog. And that sort of like leads him to saying, whatever there is down there, it's a big shark, but it is a fish. It's just a fish, and we can kill it. Okay, so elements of your life kind of come in. I think that flavors a scene or a story. But yeah, we don't write anything, Acolytes, it's hard to say. It's semi-autobiographical in the way that, it's about bored teenagers wandering around an empty town, and they get into trouble and they're harassed by bogan bullies, and that happened to us. So, elements of our characters are sometimes based on us. I mean, I know Shayne often bases his his nerds on me. When he's designing someone, they quite amazingly have my hobbies and my interests and musical tastes and stuff. So it's quite funny.
I suppose that is the interesting thing of having a writing partner. You're getting an insight into them, and then you're seeing yourself reflected in the characters they write, and you guys are writing about each other sometimes. Like, that's got to be interesting trying to work that out. Absolutely.
It's one of the good things too. Like, Shayne and I are old friends, so. And we grew up in the same town and have known each other since high school. We knew each other since primary school, but we became firmer friends in high school. And so, we grew up, watching the same movies and listening to the same music and reading the same books and comics. And, we'd recommend things to each other to, see if we can impress each other with our comic of the week or our movie of the week, and that just extends into our writing as well. When we write, we always write to impress each other first.
Yeah,
we're our own audience. We try to, if we're writing comedy, it's to make the other person laugh. If we're writing a scary scene, well, I've got to try and scare him. He's going to scare me. So we're our own first audience.
That makes sense. Circling back to Bait 3D. There's a piece of IMDb trivia on the page that says that there was almost a sequel called Deep Water, in which a plane that's en route from China to Australia crashes in the ocean. Did you know about this? Was there ever a chance that you were going to work on this? What happened to that movie?
We wrote the first draft of it.
You wrote that movie?
Yeah, we wrote it. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was Deep Water.
That's hilarious.
And but then there was a very similar event happened in reality, and it put the whole project on ice. But
370, right?
Yeah, apparently pre-COVID it was going into development again. So I'd heard the director of Killing Ground, which is one of my favorite Australian thrillers, and of course, in true Hollywood style, they've already brought in new writers, so who knows how much of our original material right there will be there. But it could still go ahead. Who knows? So it's basically sharks on a plane. That was the way we pitched it.
Right. So the plane is like slowly sinking, and then there's sharks circling.
Exactly.
Yeah, okay, I gotcha.
The plane crashes. It starts to sink. And sharks get inside.
Are there any like characters that come back, or just a
new kind of cast and everything?
Because I was like, how do you pull off the John McClane, like wrong place, wrong time again, like
that's it
in the order? Yeah. But who knows? New draft.
It's just bad luck. Oh yeah, who knows?
You never know.
That might surprise us.
Well, speaking of surprise, then I was going to ask you a bit later, but I'll ask you about now. Like having written something like that, and then I think you said that there were like other drafts after Bait 3D when you wrote it, and then going to see it. How do you distance yourself from the project, but then also how does it feel seeing little bits come through?
It's a really weird experience. You don't really get used to it. It doesn't hurt as much as it used to anymore, because you just go, that's the industry, that's the game, and that's the way it is. And so, everything that I've seen of mine, apart from the stuff we've done for Cartoon Network, it's generally around, I don't know, 90%, 100% of what we've written, because that's the way animation works. The script is king/queen. They take that, and the animators just enhance what's written there. So it's pretty close, and that's why I've quite immodestly enjoyed the animation work probably more than anything else. And then you go and see something like Acolytes was about 70% of what we'd written. A lot of the dialogue had been changed and simplified. Then Bait 3D was, I don't know. It's hard to put, maybe 50%. The action was all ours and the characters were all ours. But again, dialogue had changed. And then The Darkness, which was our Blumhouse film, that kind of was different again. Well, when we wrote it, it was set in Australia.
Okay.
So it
That's
was
interesting.
set in California, and it didn't have Native American gods in it or anything like that. So everything changes. I've seen an episode of Shizao, which is something that I wrote, and I don't think I really wrote a word of it.
Right.
But my name's on the credit, and I got a check, so I'll shut up.
So then you're a board member on the Writers Guild as well, right? And so obviously, you know, there's some very interesting rules about crediting and things like that. I mean, I've heard people talk about, you know, dialogue is probably less important than the action, things like that.
Yeah,
so
you can actually have the dialogue rewritten completely. You can change every word of dialogue in a script. And that's less important than premise, scene construction, characterization, and character arc. So that's all the bone stuff. Dialogue and a lot of other stuff is just the superficial cosmetic stuff. So some people, when they do a pass, they try to just change everything in dialogue just for the sake of it, or they'll change character names, or they'll try to do gender swaps. It doesn't really matter. You know, in the end. So it's a complex thing, but it's all set up to protect generally the original writers. So if you are the first draft writer on a screenplay, then you know it's all about protecting your right as generally being the author or the creator of the work.
That makes sense. The example I always go back to is when Joss Whedon did a pass of Speed, and it's all his dialogue. And when you watch the movie, like that's a Joss Whedon movie, but there's no credit to it. So
absolutely. Yeah.
I was always interested by how that came about. Speaking of Bait then in like the international market, right? So obviously Bait was a really big hit in China. And then you obviously got a sequel greenlit from that. And then you talked about The Darkness changing to an American film. What do you try to write for things that are in the international market, or do you find yourself having to think in sort of a business context when you're doing that and pushing things to, oh, this is big in China, things like that?
It depends on the project. Like, you know, ACOYLTES was meant to be shot here. We were originally going to shoot it ourselves, actually. That's why we chose something that was just 3 kids wandering around with shovels for
90 minutes. Yeah,
we thought we could do it. So you know, it made sense here. Bait was set on the Gold Coast in the first draft, so we just kept it here. Even though if you've seen the film, there's these bizarre transatlantic accents that the characters have. They're neither Australian nor American. The Darkness was set in Sydney, and the not the Blue Mountains. There's another mountain range down there, kind of around the Snowy Mountains and Sydney. So we wrote it to be an Australian film. That was the brief. You know, Greg McLean came to us and said, "Look, I want to do a possession story, but I want it to be like a fairly grounded, gritty Australian possession film." So, you know, that was foremost in our minds. We have written stuff that's set in Vietnam, stuff that's written in the States, stuff that's written in the UK. And so they are deliberately written to be situated over there. But the way we generally approach things, and it's nothing methodical, it's just the stories we like. We think of universal stories. A story that could be set here, but with, you know, a few days' work, it could be set in the States or the UK or Spain or anywhere. It's generally... You know, it's less about the location determining anything. You know, location can be important. Like we might decide we're going to write something set in the mountains or a desert or a grassy field. But, you know, most countries will have those terrains.
Yeah. Do you find that then when you're pitching something or you sell a script, the first thing that comes up is, we like it, but States, or we like it, but UK, like people trying to change where it's set just because of the accent? Is that still a thing that happens?
No, the more change, no, it's not really. Rarely does that happen. It's kind of like someone might take the script and it'll travel to the States. And people say, we kind of like this, but let's shoot it over here. You know, we've written a script that is set firmly in the States, and it's going to be shot in Australia for the States. That happens as well. When we get notes, it's generally we like it, but it's, you know, it's too expensive, or we like it, but that genre is not really hot right now, or we like it, but could you swap the gender around, which is the big note 101 for things, you know. So it's other things other than the setting. The setting is kind of you know, we'll make it fit if people love the story, but there's other things that usually people say no to a script about before the setting.
Makes sense. Sort of diverting a little bit, you mentioned before you wrote that book, Unbidden.
Yes.
I wanted to talk about that because you wrote it under the pen name, you and Shayne.
It's a little play on a park in Dalby called Thomas Jack Park.
Okay.
So Thomas Jack Park was the only perpetually green oasis of fun and fertility in Dalby when everything else was flat and boring and full of
and the
prickles.
dump, yeah.
And the dump, but the park was a place where kids loved to go. It was always green. It was always cared for. It was always cool. It was a fun part of Dalby. There aren't a lot of fun parts of Dalby, but that was, and so we just named it after a place that was fun to us. So yeah, TJ Park. That's where
so you decided to name your terrifying supernatural crime novel with a nice, happy name related to a green pasture.
Very perverse people.
I like that. I was a little confused because I looked it up and then it was like there were multiple books and it was like perhaps you'd released it slowly or...
It was released in 4 or 5 parts. I can't remember now. Initially, HarperCollins wanted us to release it in serial form, which we were cool with because we grew up with classic Doctor Who, which was always 5 eps made up the whole story. Monday to Friday would be 5 eps. Dickens released a lot of his novels in serial form. Stephen King's released a few things in serial form. We grew up reading 2000 AD comics, so the stories would come out like that. So we were cool with it as a format. But you're not alone in being confused because it was called Unbidden, but each book had its own sort of like title.
Yeah.
And then it was released as an omnibus edition, the collected edition. Towards the end. So you can either get the individual books, which are cool because they've got really great art.
Yeah.
And then you can get the omnibus edition, which has its different cover as well.
Very cool. Another thing that I saw that I was surprised by was you did a comic book recently.
I did.
Horror Man.
Uh-huh.
And you were talking about, as a kid, you'd make Batman, but not really Batman. Is this your version of, doing the crack at the superhero you've always wanted to do?
Yeah, but, it's filtered through, all my other kind of interests. So it's a mix of, everything that I kind of do is, I call it kind of like it's a pop cultural blender. And I just make a kind of a mix or a frappe of all the things that I'm into. And, so for me, it's, Sentai, TV series and movies and kaiju monster movies and superheroes. So it's Marvel and DC comics mixed with anime and manga and monster movies. It's a big mix. So it's very subversive. It's meant to be, the first issue was just a teaser. I just wanted to break the cobwebs with comic book writing. I tried years ago when I was in my 20s and actually faked my way into the offices of DC Comics when I was on holiday in New York.
Okay.
I fibbed that I was there to see an artist.
Wow.
And someone said, the artists don't really work out of the offices here. They work from their homes. And so, I'm very naive.
You're right.
And anyway, they said, look, would you like to talk to Darren Vincenzo, who was the editor of Batman and Detective Comics at the time?
Wow.
I said, yeah, sure. And I went into his office and he just said, oh, well, blah, blah, blah. Well, what do you got as a story? And I just, oh my God, I didn't even have any stories. So I pitched some half-assed things. And then he said, listen, write them up for me. And so I spent, a couple of days just in a higher place. I think, this is when you had to hire computers.
Right.
Rather than, how cheap they are now, and I spent some stupid amount of money, but I sent these 1 pages for these stories, and he said, look, I really like them, but look, you are a first time writer, go away and write a book, write a screenplay, and then come back, and we'll talk. So I went away and did all those things. I actually emailed Darren a few years ago, and I said, listen, you might not remember me, but I ran into you in New York in the 90s. Excuse me. And he told me to go away and write novels and movies and TV shows, and I did. And he said, yeah, I do remember you. It's great. And I said to Darren Vincenzo, thanks for your advice. Sorry. Thanks for your advice. I went away and I did what you said. I wrote movies and I wrote a book and I wrote TV shows. I still haven't written a comic. And
right.
I thought, man, I've got to do it. So I met up with a local artist, a friend of mine who I'd known for years.
Yeah.
Glenn Manders, who used to do these really cool little sort of street style indie comics called Bad Teeth in the Music Street Press when that was a thing. And we just had a burger and a shake and had a chat about all the kinds of things. I pitched him a bunch of stories and he really liked the concept for Horror Man. So hopefully we'll do a couple of more issues. That's something I'd love to do. as a kind of a summer project. So
yeah, it was interesting just seeing like just how the whole thing is happening and all the different diverse things that you've done. So I was wondering like, yeah, what's next? Like what haven't you tackled yet? Like an album, like.
I don't know. Look, I'm thinking. Look, I've never written a novel by myself, and that's something I've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to tackle that. More comics. I think that'd be something that would be fun. And look, really, we've had lots of stuff made, but I still haven't got that one film that I'd say. I like aspects of all the stuff that's been made, but I haven't seen that one yet that just goes, oh my god, it blows me away.
They did it.
Who knows whether I'll see it. I remember asking Everett DeRoche, who was an Australian screenwriter, and Everett wrote 15 or 16 different horror thrillers, and he wrote Long Weekend, Razorback, Patrick, and Road Games, which are sort of like Ozploitation classics.
Yeah.
2 of those are Quentin Tarantino's favorite Australian films, Road Games and Patrick. He references them in his own films. And I said to Everett, how many films of yours that you have made? You've had 15 or 16. That's an amazing track record. Which was your favorite? He said, I didn't really like most of them. He said, I kind of like Frog Dreaming the most, which is a kid's film that had Henry Thomas from E.T. in it.
Right.
And it's not bad. I saw it when I was a kid and I was kind of creeped out by it. But he liked that the best, So that surprised me because the other ones are seen as classics. So the work eventually goes away. Once you submit the script, it is out of your hands.
Yeah.
You have no control over it. You can't control whether it's good, bad, or in the middle. You can't control the way fans react to it too. So when someone says to me they love a film or a TV show, or I've done some Star Wars stuff as well for Disney.
Cool.
Some character featurettes. Of course, guys my age hated them.
Yeah, that's a tricky Star Wars these days. Yeah,
it is. So I'm equally surprised when someone likes or hates what I write.
Yeah,
it's someone else's journey after I write it.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to ask then, like, when a movie comes out, considering the distance to the project and what you're talking about, do you try to avoid then reading things, or do you just have to go in saying it's mine, but it isn't really?
I can't help myself initially. I give up after a while. Like, a good example is The Darkness. We were so excited for that coming out, and it was our first US film. It was Blumhouse, Kevin Bacon, and and the reviews started coming in, the critics' reviews started coming in. And they were just all slamming it, and we were looking at the Rotten Tomatoes thing, which is a bad thing to do anyway.
Yeah.
Rotten Tomatoes, as you probably know, if it's not a glowing review, it's counted as a bad review.
Exactly.
So, I think it's on something like 4 or 5% on Rotten Tomatoes, so really low.
Wow.
But that doesn't mean only 4% of people liked it. It just means
4% loved it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Exactly.
Yeah.
So I was pretty depressed about it, but that was critics at the time.
Yeah.
And look, the fans had some valid criticisms as well. They were saying, well, this just isn't scary. Well, the trailer was so scary. It's just but it got edges taken down, and it was its own thing. Blumhouse are very smart, by the way. They said, we're going to release it on this many screens on this day, and this is how many people are going to go see it, and this is how much money we're going to make. It made its budget back several times over. It did really well. I think Wikipedia calls it a critical failure and a box office success. So we learned after that you can as long as you got one or the other, you're cool. Give you. So our managers at the time called up and said, congratulations on the opening. Okay, well, fair enough. So you do. You can't help it but be curious about it.
Yeah.
But it's just the nature of the game. You want people to love it, but I've got my own problems with everything.
Well, I mean, I was gonna ask. I mean, like, I guess it's tough, I suppose, for people to sort of see like the movies that you've had that are made aren't really the bulk of your work at all. I mean, your work most people like won't see unless it gets turned into a film. So I suppose I was going to ask then, are there a few, you're talking about things that are staying in option and stuff, and on your website, there's lists of all these projects and things that sound really cool. Are there ones that unexpectedly just pop back up when you thought they were dead, or are there...
All the time. We've got one that we wrote probably 10 years ago, a revenge thriller. Well, it's turned into a revenge thriller. It was just originally a thriller, and then it was a psychological thriller in the last draft, and now it's a revenge thriller. So you just think these projects are gone, and they pop up. And it was the same for The Darkness. It was a film called 6 Miranda Drive, which was going to be made in Australia. And then it was going to be up with Lionsgate at one stage, and then that fell over.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we got a call saying, "Oh, it's going to be made with Blumhouse."
Yeah.
So they can just appear out of anywhere. So a script never dies; it just goes into circulation, and it's about finding the right person. This is what I tell people because over 90%, I'd say 98, 99% of screenwriting is rejection.
Yeah.
Your scripts get rejected on a daily basis. Your concepts get rejected. And so you've got to be prepared for that. But it's not about the person it's not the 99 that's saying no, it's the one person that
exactly
says yes.
Yeah,
that's it.
Just bring the microphone a little closer,
and the person that says yes, but they also understand the project too. So
and they have money,
and they nurture it the right way.
Yeah, I agree. Is there one that you just look at that you think, man, I really want to see that? Like, still? Yeah,
there's a couple that we've written that I just can't believe they haven't been made, and it's a curse.
Yeah.
We curse ourselves every time we write something. If we either say this is the best thing we've ever written, or I can't see how this isn't going to get made soon, that's a surefire way that it's not going to get made. So we just wrote a supernatural mystery called Crew.
Okay.
That was about based on real events, but a completely made up story about the events that turned Arthur Conan Doyle, the creator of Sherlock Holmes, into a believer in the supernatural.
Of fairies, right? Yeah.
That's right. He believed in fairies and ghosts and stuff like that. So I thought, he created Sherlock Holmes. What kind of event would have made him believe in it? So that's our story.
Sounds really cool.
Investigating a haunting in this isolated manner. We also did a slasher film a couple of years ago before Halloween came out, and the new resurgence. So people saying, well, there's no slasher films around now, and then there's the catch-22 of, oh, well, that script's already gone out. So, but who knows? It might resurface, and it was our take on the slasher film. Very postmodern idea. About 5 girls who survived slasher massacres and how they go to a PSTD camp. And how their slashes converge on them and final girls. You can't kill your own final girl.
Right, of course.
Final girls. So
that's hilarious.
Yeah, it's kind of like Halloween meets Buffy, basically.
Yeah.
And
that like cabin in the woods vibe to it. Yeah.
We've also done a really cool subversive vampire film as well. And I just don't know why. They just, some of them have gotten up a little bit. The slasher film, we got lots of calls, and same with Crew. It's opened a lot of doors. People will take meetings. They love the writing, they love the premise, but so we hear things like, well, slasher films aren't being made, the vampire thing's over. What was the other thing? And with Crew, period horror is really hard, even if you say, well, the others did well, and Woman in Black, and The Conjuring is even period horror. It's 70s. So it's just these things, these mindsets people get into. So, and you can't convince them, and you just got to move on to the next thing.
Well, it's interesting what you say about circulation, and it is literally cycles of genres coming back, and so it's just, well, if it's not now, it'll be in 10 years or something,
Yeah, it's weird. Like, we've had a possession film get made, The Darkness, and then a haunting / possession, and our new one is a possession film, but it's a kind of, again, it's a fresh take on it.
Right.
It'll probably get made, once it was in before COVID struck. So hopefully, fingers crossed, it'll go into production pretty quickly once everything gets up again. But they go in and out of vogue, those kinds of films.
Speaking of COVID, then, has it been both like a lot of the films in development have stopped and you started selling new things because people have been requesting stuff?
Yeah, people want stuff ready to go. They know that the machine has stopped, but at a certain point it's going to start up again, and there's going to be a huge gap in content. And so we've been really busy developing things. Cool. We got calls from the States this year to pitch a horror TV show, which we're doing the pitch doc up for. People wanting stuff. So it's been it's been good for, if you're a writer, it's actually been not bad. If you're a crew, it's been a horrid time. If you're a writer, you do what you've always done, and that's write. Sit there and write.
Yeah, stay at home. Yeah.
Stay at home and write.
Speaking of home, you had there's a synopsis for your short film, Huge.
Yes.
And it says, if you want to be larger than life in this town, immortality comes at a price. And I attributed that to sort of balancing screenwriting in the career with the rest of your life. And so I wanted to ask you, sort of, you're doing all these things at once. You said you're constantly busy, find it hard to stop. And it's something that I'm sort of struggling with at the moment, of just like balancing all these different things. What is your advice for like doing all of this and pursuing that, but also having a life?
Look, I think if you want to be an artist of any kind, it requires sacrifice. That sacrifice might be security in a job. It might be a decent constant paycheck, or you might, there's risks. Like sometimes if you want to be a screenwriter, for example, you could be Lee Winnell with, rolling around Scrooge McDuck style in your money in your Hollywood Hills mansion. That could be you. Or it could be the guy that makes $200 a year. I'm lucky enough that I'm kind of in the middle. I call myself a modestly successful screenwriter, in terms of that. I make a living from writing.
Yeah.
And I've done it for a long time. So I would, that's my, I think that's my book title, a moderately successful screenwriter.
Nice.
But it's a risk, and it's not for everyone. I made a conscious decision not to be on the corporate ladder. I know that I could have worked in advertising. I could have been a creative director. I would have, probably had a bigger and nicer place than I have now, more expensive car. Not that I'm really into that, but I would have felt unfulfilled, and that's what I did. So I'm happy and grateful of the level that I've achieved. But I know it would probably kind of be stressful for a lot of people not to have that constant thing, and that's why they don't do it. I've got friends that wanted to be filmmakers, but then went into other pursuits, and they just, they keep saying, "Oh, I want to write and I want to do what you do, but I've just, I've got to pay the bills and all, Well, I still pay my bills, but you work damn hard to do it." So for me, it's like, just do it. If you want to take this risky, crazy ride, you just got to grab at it. And there are the sacrifices for me is that I do often work 7 days a week.
Yeah.
Not 8-10 hours a day all the time. I have I've got plenty of procrastination time. I do have a pretty good lifestyle, but yeah, there's always something on. But I stress out if my partner reminded me at Christmas time last year. I said, I'm saying, I'm so busy at the moment. She said, well, this time last year you're worried that there was going to be no work.
So true. So
it's you got to be happy being busy, but you've also got to realize that when it's quiet, getting right, make it. And when COVID struck, I actually wasn't panicking because I felt I'm going back to what I was like when I was in my late 20s, which was I didn't have any work, I didn't have any profile, but I was happy in the writing. I was working in a bar.
That's it.
Doing a little bit of casual work at QUT as a tutor, and I was happy as anything. I wasn't dealing with the crazy notes and the frustrations of the film industry. I was just purely happy in the writing, and I couldn't have been happier. So you just got to remember those times as well. Write for the right reason, and that is because you love writing.
Well, there you have it, folks. Mr. Moderately Successful Screenwriter Shayne Armstrong, thank you for coming on the show today.
No worries. It's been fun.
You've dropped some really interesting points. I really enjoyed talking to you. And it's been good to finally meet you. You've been sort of circling around the periphery of people that I know for a while. So cool. Thank you for coming on.
No worries.
Cough and all. I appreciate it.
Well, it's stopped now that we've finished.
I mean, what cough? What are you talking about? There was no cough.
I know. It's just bizarre, isn't it? Just comes and goes.
Yeah. So this was the first of 2 Australian screen industry podcasts. The next podcast we're doing is we sort of focused a bit on film, I think, today. The next one we're sort of going into a bit of TV. We've got Stephen M. Owen and Lee McGrath coming on next week. They are. I've been fortunate enough to sort of meet them in and around Hoodlum and Harrow, and they're really cool. If you have a question for either of them that I should ask them next week, what would it be?
You both seem like such nice men. What are you doing in the film industry?
Okay, we'll open with that. We'll go full Dr. Phil on them and just see what's beneath the surface. Thanks for coming on, and thank you for listening. This has been episode 27. You can go to theslopshack.com, find out more about what we're doing. You can subscribe to the YouTube channel. We still got Finn Taylor versus the internet. Finn's just behind the camera here. We're about to record another episode, so I promise you that it's coming out. Make sure to subscribe. And what is the water bottle called again? Camelback. Just right down the barrel of the lens there. Buy Camelback. We'll see you next time. Do you have a sign off? Do you have I don't know. What's your favorite line you go back to from a movie?
I don't. Well, one that I wanted to give my sign off is from the 1960s TV show The Prisoner, where all the people in the sort of like the cult-like village would go, "Be seeing you," which is like their very creepy kind of like coded sign off to people. But it's too close to the old.
Right. Right, true. Well,
work in Australia.
Till next time, be seeing you.
On that classy note.
All right, that's it. Thank you very much.
All right.